back. There's been a dramatic demonstration in the difference in safety between the car that you buy here in South Africa and the car that you can buy in Europe or North America. The safety organisation NCAP held a demonstration in which two Nissan NP300 hard-body bakkies, I'm sure you've seen them, they crashed into each other. The bakkies sold in Europe would have protected the driver properly. The bakkies sold here that you could buy would have seen the driver being badly trapped inside the vehicle. Well, Layton Beard from the Automobile Association is here to discuss this with us. He's the spokesperson for the AA. Layton, good afternoon. Thanks for making the trip.
Good to be with you, Stephen.
Why is a car that you would buy in Europe safer and cheaper than the car you would buy here?
Well, that's a great question. I think we need to be asking government, South African Bureau of Standards, National Regulator for Compulsory Standards, these questions. Bottom line is that we have standards in South Africa. There are minimum standards, and the manufacturers of these vehicles will tell you that they meet the minimum standards. Problem that we have is that these minimum standards are obviously too low. We've tested the MP300 in 2018, got a 0-star rating. Very little seems to have changed in the last 2 years. That car is still crumbling when it's compared against a similar vehicle from Europe. And it comes down to what the manufacturers have to put into that vehicle. Technically, they have to put in seat belts and brakes and nothing more.
I mean, in North America, from I think 1998, you had to have ABS.
Yes.
You had to have
ESC,
airbags, and all the rest.
Yes. I mean, ABS, ESC, airbags. These are all life-saving technologies. They can be added to vehicles at very modest price increases, especially when you look at economies of scale. So yes, I mean, they've been mandatory for very long in those countries, 25 years. In South Africa, they're not mandatory yet. And the question that we've been posing since we started the Safer Cars for Africa program in 2017 is, where are the minimum standards? Can we improve them? What needs to be done to make them better?
How much of this is to do with government? I mean, is government just taking its eye off the ball? Is this a failure of governance? No one's looked at this issue for 20 years?
I think it is an issue of maybe we are highlighting a problem now that has never been highlighted before in South Africa. When we tested the first cars in 2017, I don't think that we even expected to see the results that we've seen. We have seen very good cars, Stephen. I mean, there are cars that are produced locally, that are sold locally, that are getting 4 and 3 stars, and that's very good and encouraging for us to see. Even in passengers in the rear are getting good ratings, so that is encouraging to see. I think our problem is when we look at cars like the NP300, which is sold as a family sedan. It's built as a hard body, and quite clearly it doesn't meet those standards. The A-pillar of the vehicle completely crumbles. The steering column is basically pushed into the driver. You said the driver, you'd be able to take him out. He'd suffer fatal injuries in that vehicle.
Okay, and they called this a hard body.
They call this a hard body. So for us, it's a big issue.
Okay, if we were to introduce mandatory safety measures, so in other words, if government were to, tomorrow, mythically, sort of introduce a safety measure that said every car on our road that's currently being sold had to have ABS, had to have airbags, what would that do to the price of these cars? Would it push it up dramatically?
No, it wouldn't push it wouldn't push the prices up dramatically. I think at the moment they're being sold as luxury add-ons to very many vehicles. It doesn't have to be expensive. Again, as I said earlier, when you look at economies of scale, when you're buying 10,000 airbags and one unit costs you $100, if you're buying 10,000 of them, you can bring that cost down dramatically. ESC can be added to a vehicle with ABS at less than 1,000 rand. So this is not expensive technology. It shouldn't be a luxury add-on. It should be standard even on entry-level vehicles. We would like to see these vehicles tested again in South Africa, all the vehicles that are available locally, and at point of sale, in other words, on the dealership floor where Stephen walks in to get his vehicle, there is a sticker in the car saying this is what the rating of this vehicle is. We think that it can be done. There is political will that is needed to make it done. We're not going to stop this. We're going to carry on testing to make sure that consumers are made aware and educated about this.
Okay, it's easy to blame the high rate of deaths on our roads, the high number of deaths on our roads, on the fact that someone somewhere sitting in an office near the union buildings in Swane hasn't actually done what they're supposed to do with safety standards.
Yeah.
Is it possible to actually know how big a factor the design of cars and their features is? And I say that because there's plenty of research that shows our drivers drive very far and very fast.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Unfortunately, there is no split in terms of what the factor of the vehicle is. When we look at the statistics, and last year there were around 13,500 people who died on our roads, human factor accounts for between 90 and 95% of all crashes and fatalities on our roads. So people overtaking on a blind drive, people overtaking on a solid white line, this type of thing. People not adhering to the rules.
90 to 95%
of all fatalities. The others are vehicle considerations. That's a mechanical issue, and then environmental factors such as rain and fog and people not being able to see. But the vast majority of crashes are as a result of human factors. So when we consider that humans are driving these vehicles, what we would like to see is humans driving safer vehicles. So if a human factor is a huge reason for crashes, we'd like to have those humans obviously in safer vehicles. Now, when you look at some of the vehicles that are available locally and internationally that have very good star ratings, if there is a human factor that is going to cause a crash, and that human factor ends up in a crash, and that vehicle has got a good safety rating with all the necessary safety features that we're talking about, it is able to mitigate against that serious injury, and that's what we're looking for.
Okay, so we need better cars. I mean, South Africans deserve cars that are as safe as cars in Europe or North America, for example.
Absolutely.
What's it going to take to make that happen? Is it going to require a big push from citizens, from organizations like yours?
Absolutely. I think, that is probably the quote of the day so far, Stephen. I mean, we really want to see a bigger drive from consumer organizations, from people who are buying vehicles to demand these safer vehicles. We want people to go to dealers and we want people to go to manufacturers and say, we actually want safer vehicles. There was a poll done as we launched safer cars, and basically 80% of people said that safety was a factor in their decision to buy a vehicle. Unfortunately, in South Africa, it's not a culture. We don't have this culture of looking for safety. We have a culture of looking for mag wheels and for speakers and for Bluetooth, but that needs to change. We need people to demand safety features on vehicles, and we need people to actually buy vehicles that are safety tested and rated, and to say we're not going to buy those vehicles that aren't. And I think once we get that groundswell of consumerism coming, it may turn the tide, hopefully.
Okay, I mean, someone in government somewhere will be watching this and thinking, all right, we now need to introduce regulations, we need to make a change.
Yes.
Some regulation you can actually copy and paste from other jurisdictions.
Yes,
I mean,
from the UN.
Could we do the same thing?
Absolutely, we could. I think it's a question of understanding the legislation, I have no doubt that the people, our colleagues at the National Regulator for Compulsory Standards do understand the regulations. It's a question of understanding them and implementing them. There is obviously a cost factor involved in this, but it's about understanding the laws and how we can apply them locally and putting pressure on manufacturers not to only meet the minimum standards, but to actually say we want to produce cars for sale in this country that are going to keep people safe in the event of a crash. And really, it's not only the consumer's responsibility to do this. It's about the manufacturers. It's about government. It's going to take a collective effort.
Okay, when we look at the accidents that actually happen on our roads, what pushes the death rate up are the accidents that often involve trucks and minibus taxis.
Yeah.
When it comes to minibus taxis, I mean, we've had scandal after scandal in some ways with some of those taxis.
Sure.
Some of them have failed safety tests.
Yes.
It would seem that that's really where we need to concentrate. If we want to save South African lives, we actually need to start there.
Well, the highest majority of crashes involve sedans. Minibus taxis come in third after light delivery vehicles. So obviously if a minibus taxi is involved in a crash, it's obviously carrying a lot more passengers. So we do need to look at this issue of regulation, not only of the vehicle, but of law enforcement. Now, in 2019, the Traffic Law Enforcement Committee came out and said there's a lot of things that need to happen in terms of traffic law enforcement. One thing is we need double the amount of traffic law enforcers. We need to make sure that law is applied properly throughout the country and consistently, and we need people to obey the rules of the road. That currently isn't happening, and that's another situation. I sound like I'm bleating, but that really does need to change. So we need safer vehicles. It's a safe systems approach. We need safe roads on which people drive. We need safe vehicles in which people are driving. We need proper law enforcement, and we need proper post-crash intervention. And when we get those right, we will see these numbers dip. But until we do all of that, we're just going to carry on seeing the situation where hundreds of thousands of people are dying on our roads every 10, 15 years. It's a crisis. It's a national crisis, Stephen. And people are beginning to get to this slowly, but it needs to happen quicker. I mean, we're losing 14,000 people a year. It can't carry on like this.
One transport expert once said to me that if this were the aviation industry, it would be the equivalent of 3 jumbo jets crashing a week in South Africa.
No, precisely. I mean, when you look at the numbers and when you look at how they rack up over a period of time, it's incredible. The amount of people who die on our roads needlessly is just, I actually don't have words to describe it. It's just terrible. And the sad thing about it is that we do have ways to mitigate against that. Law enforcement, safer cars, safer roads, these are things that we need to be doing. We need to stop campaigns that are seasonal, and we need to make this year-round.
Layton Beard, thank you very much indeed. Really do appreciate it. Spokesperson for the Automobile Association. I don't know how you feel about the car that you're driving in. Might be worth taking a look.